Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Miskatonic AV Club, a Mythos Busters production. I'm Sean. Returning with me is, of course, Ian.
Hello.
And Scott.
Hello.
And if you've been watching these in order, you may have noticed Sneak Attack Nick at the end of the Seeker series. So Nick's here with us tonight as well to wrap this one up.
Hi, guys.
So, guys, are you ready for this?
I am so ready.
I know I am. And you know why? Because I'm a survivor!
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. It's only a matter of time.
Here I was going to say I have Eye of the Tiger queued up, but
that works too.
yeah, I'd rather have that Survivor myself.
Cue the montage of Wendy training in the Siberian snow.
Pulling a train.
Yeah.
All right. So, Wendy. Scott, I know you've actually kind of turned coat on the Mystics, and I think you've fully pledged your banners to the Survivor flag.
Yes.
I can't entirely blame you because Survivor cards are probably my second favorite. No, they're definitely my second favorite. They're not too far behind Mystic stuff. So why don't you walk us through Wendy?
Sure. So this is Wendy Adams. She has 4 willpower, 3 intellect, 1 combat, and 4 agility. She's a drifter. She has a reaction when you reveal a chaos token. Choose and discard a card from your hand. Cancel that chaos token and reveal it, or reveal a new chaos token. Limit once per test/ability. And then her Elder Sign effect is +0. If Wendy's Amulet is in play, you automatically succeed the test instead, or automatically succeed instead. And then she has 7 health and 7 stamina. Oh.
And then her deck building restrictions. She can take.
Yes,
rogue
she can
cards.
have rogue. So I'm gonna gush just for a quick second.
We've all been allowed to do it.
Make
so
it
you
quick.
go.
You're cleaning
Thanks,
up.
Nick. Perfect balance of health and sanity, which is nice. The
Yes,
ability
they are the same number.
Yes,
Mhm.
but I mean a good balance. I like 6 and 8 or 7. It's not 9 and 5. A little more difficult. The ability to mitigate the tentacle token, which is amazing, and then even just looking at her stats, we have a lot of investigators with kind of lower stats here and there. She has the least amount of wasted stats, if you will. The fact that her lowest one is a 1, it gives her the ability to have 2 4 stats, which is fantastic. So that's my gushing about just the front of this card.
Okay. So then, to get the full picture of Wendy, of course, we must move on to her signature card. So, Nick, do you want to read the amulet?
Sure thing. Wendy's Amulet is a 2-cost asset with 2 wild skill icons, has the item and relic traits. It uses up an accessory slot, and the text is Wendy Adams deck only. You may play the topmost event in your discard pile as if it were in your hand. Forced. After you play an event, place it on the bottom of your deck instead of in your discard pile.
And of
It's
course,
also unique.
It is unique. And then rounding out the picture, Ian, do you want to give us your signature your signature
but this is my
treachery from Arkham Knights?
Jeez.
Abandoned and alone. Revelation, take 2 direct horror and remove all cards in your discard pile from the game.
I don't need anyone.
I don't need them. I don't need anyone.
So I think it's safe to say that the Chaos Bag is one of the defining mechanics of the game.
It's kind of important.
And you're rarely...
I play without it.
Sometimes you're okay. Sometimes you're okay.
It's going
with
well.
Oh my god. Sometimes you're okay with what comes out of the Chaos Bag.
Should I leave, Sean? I'm sorry.
But rarely are you happy.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy's ability to just say, "No, I'd like to try again." It's so good. And I don't think I realized this when I was just playing through the core, because I just don't think it ever worked out this way when I was playing her. But this is whenever you reveal a chaos token, not when you reveal a chaos token for a skill check. If you're just revealing a chaos token from one of those abilities that tells you to reveal a chaos token and you get something you don't like, Wendy can cheat fate there too.
Yep.
So yeah, I am
It's kind of
pro
like
Wendy.
It's kind of like a similar to grotesque statue, like a mini grotesque statue built in. Like
One that you don't have to spend
awesome.
experience on or use charges for or play down.
Right. I mean, you do have to discard a card.
This is true.
But I mean, we've all been there halfway through the game, and your whole, or you've got your setup on your tableau good, and you're kind of just drawing a card at the end of your turn, and you've got a couple you're just not going to use, and there you go. They're basically rerolls.
The thing about Wendy is that there's, as we'll see in the Survivor card pool, there's other cards that kind of give you that like emergency, oops, I failed. And then you have hers as kind of like the second layer behind that. So you have like this whole system of redundancies, which really appeals to me. You know, coming from Lord of the Rings, I used to always say like I liked having, you know, backup systems for my backup systems, like always having all these kind of backup plans, and that's what Wendy is. So I kind of have a deep dark secret, which I don't think is a super surprise for people in the chat if they paid attention. But even though I'm totally a rogue and I maintain that, Wendy is actually my favorite core set investigator.
Yeah, I mean, she's half rogue, so that can be forgiven.
Yeah, that definitely plays a big part in it. It's that combination of survival that actually makes her feel like super roguey to me, like this feeling of like some little girl coming up behind you and digging a knife into your back.
I mean, she's basically like Little Orphan Annie on a mission, isn't she?
Yeah. Ultimate street urchin.
Little murderous orphan Annie.
Yes. So now, one thing I didn't see when I first started playing the core that we'll get to when we get to this specific card that I've come around to since getting out of the core, the fact that Wendy's Amulet has wild pips and is an item. Hard stop, if the rest of the box was blank, that would be good right there. And then, on top of that, you have that ability where you can essentially play the top card of the top event of your discard piles if it were in your hand. Don't do the thing where you think you can play your emergency quiche twice in the same turn, because you read the card wrong. It's whenever even if you play an event from your hand while Wendy's Amulet is in play, it goes on your discard pile.
Yes.
But what you can do is quiche, Amulet, and then quiche again. That's legal.
Yeah. The timing of the Amulet is really interesting. Was one of the reasons I like Wendy. It's kind of an interesting deck to play. It's not necessarily straightforward. You do have to time things correctly. So, you know, oftentimes I won't play the Amulet right away. I'm more focused on kind of getting these other cards out, maybe a little Rabbit's Foot, which we'll get to soon. And then maybe midway through the game, I'll put down the Amulet, or when I really need to recur something from the top of my discard pile.
And I think I gotta say too.
Go on.
Go ahead, Sean.
Oh no, it's a polite standoff.
I have to let you go.
Oh god damn it! But I live in Minnesota.
Well,
so
then I'll
Canada
jump in
the
and say
US.
Go, Nick.
No, I don't have anything. I was just kidding. I was being a jackass.
Frick,
I was just gonna say her signature weakness is one of the easiest ones I think to deal with. I found, like, I'm not too afraid of drawing it. Like, it's not great, but if you're prepared, you just always keep in your mind, okay, there's 2 horror coming from my deck at some point. Don't mess up.
Well, 2 horror, and you're losing like a good pool of your resources when it comes to cards that you can replay.
Assuming you have the Amulet out.
So, right. So imagine like you get the Amulet out, and then the end of that turn, the next card you draw is a Bandit and Alone. Well, then whoop-de-doo. You know what I mean? Like it's not as pervasive as like Cover Up or Hospital Debts, but at the same time, I think it still can be like, this is an early game weakness. You want to get this early game. You want to draw into this right away, because if it hits you late game, yeah, first turn would be ideal, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yeah, I think it's only hit me once when I was like counting. I think it was like backstab on top that I was counting
Right.
on using, and then of course it came up. But
Oh my god.
yeah, I think you're right on the money, Nick, that it's not as consistently bad as some of the other weaknesses.
I still will never forget the game that I had like a 6 or 7 card hand, and then I drew Amnesia, and then the next turn I drew Abandon and Alone.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
So you
Amnesia
forgot that you were
is
banned
super
in the-
painful for Wendy. I hate Amnesia
Yeah.
with her.
Yeah.
It's like as bad as Paranoia for a rogue.
Like it's bad enough to be an orphan, but you don't want to be an orphan with no memory. You want to remember. You want to remember the pain of
Yeah.
your parents' death, because generally orphans do something pretty constructive with that.
Have you guys
I.e.
ever
Batman.
had a scenario or come close to it where, and I've heard of people in the chat coming close, where Abandon and Alone is like the second last card in the deck or the last card?
Oh God.
So you basically you flip it if it's the last card. You take your discard pile out of the game, then Abandon and Alone hits your discard pile. Next turn you draw Abandon and Alone again, and that just cycles itself.
She just gets into the sad spiral.
It
Yeah,
can
she's
be,
so alone.
It can be absolutely.
Starts putting on the emo. It's all there.
Yeah.
Then it's how quickly can I resign?
Yes, because every turn you're taking 3 horror. Yeah, 2 from the event and then 1 from your deck.
Right.
Reshuffling.
I've never had that happen, but my wife and I did have a 2-player game where she was playing Wendy, and it was a later turn, I think in the very first scenario in the Gathering, where like we were counting on Elusive being the topmost event in her discard pile, and we like planned around that, and then sure enough she draws Abandon and Alone, and oh, bye Elusive, there it goes. I guess you're gonna resign and Roland's gonna resign next turn. Like we could not get around that. That sucked. But no, that cycle, the Abandon and Alone cycle, would be terrifying.
Literally. All that horror.
Anyways.
So Wendy, she good. Team Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
The only real tragedy here is that it's a little bit harder unless you buy a lot of cores to play her with Agnes, because they work really well together. It turns out, just having a lot of red on the board just is kind of good. All right. So moving on from there, I'm going to pop into the first set of assets here. So we have the Rabbit's Foot, which is a 1-cost level 0 asset. It has a wild pip, the item and charm traits, and reaction. After you fail a skill test, exhaust Rabbit's Foot, draw 1 card. And it takes up, of course, the accessory slot, which it turns out Wendy kind of cares about. But
Yeah,
I still don't mind just having this in the deck, as if you draw it first, great, it'll draw you into the amulet faster. If you draw it after, great, it's a wild pip to chuck later. Like I'm never sad to have this card. And Survivors kind of have this thing where their themes are kind of like do more with less and win by losing. Those are kind of their things. So it's kind of fun to be sitting on a location where you're like, all right, I'm like 3-2 on this investigate test. I may not win it, but hey, even if I don't, whatever, I'll draw a card.
Yeah, that's what I really like about it, is that it's like if I'm sitting at 1 over, I may have ended up clicking to draw anyway because I am looking for like a skill card or something to help me out. And so this is basically like you spend that action and either you get a card, which you were going to do anyway, or hey, surprise, you passed the test and got what you wanted there. So
either way, I win.
Yep, and that's a good place to be in this game.
The other, and we'll get to it in a second, but this is a great card to combo with Scavenging, because it is an item. You'll throw it for tests. It's going to hit your discard pile at some point. Grabbing it back to recur it for something else later is awesome.
Yeah. I personally only run 1 of usually, but
in Wendy?
In Wendy, yeah. Just because I'd just rather not fail tests.
Yeah, but you're gonna though, Scott. You're gonna.
Well, I'm pretty good, so.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'll back off.
I think
I was going to say, in my fast build Zoe deck that I did like the minute I got Dunwich and I cracked it open. Didn't even read all the cards. I'm like, just building a Zoe deck. I threw in 2 Rabbit's Foot, two copies of Rabbit's Foot, and I liked it. But I also never had a situation where I had 1 on table and 1 in hand. It was always just 1 on table. So I think in some situations 2 of is a pretty good shot, but I don't think you need 2 of in a Wendy deck. I think that's just saturating that accessory slot needlessly.
Mm-hmm.
I actually do run 2 because I have a defined
Team 2 Rabbit's Foot.
I have a defined strategy, which is kind of like I want to get this in my opening hand. I play it down. I use it to get cards for a while, and then, like I said, about mid game is when I'm looking to get the amulet down and start recycling some of those events. So beyond Wendy, I'm not sure. It's definitely investigator dependent. Some investigators, you are just gonna naturally fail fewer skill tests, but for Wendy, it definitely fits. And for some other investigators where you just really want to get cards in hand and potentially maybe some of your skills are a little lower.
Spoiler alert for Dunwich. This is Amaze Balls in an Ashcan Pete deck. All right, so you guys want to hold it with 2 hands, choke up a little bit, and Nick. Oh no, I think it's Scott. You wanna take a swing at this next card?
Sure, I'll handle this large. That 2 cost, combat pip, has the item, weapon, and melee traits. Action, fight. You get +2 combat for this attack. This attack deals +1 damage. If a skull or tentacle symbol is revealed during this attack, discard baseball bat after the attack resolves, and it takes up both hands.
Does anyone else just kind of not like the art on this card?
It's a little unsettling.
It's up there for my least favorite art in the game.
Like, I'm totally okay with the fact that, like, hey, someone's at home, she's got her rollers in her hair, and she gets surprised by a monster. That's very Survivor-y. But she looks like a zombie.
Yeah.
She does. Yeah.
Anyway, art aside, it's a decent weapon. So depending on what difficulty you're playing on, it's like a 3 in 16 chance that this is going to go away. So that's that can happen. But it's a cheap card. You get +2 fight, which is good, and the damage boost.
Yep.
Is it worth taking up both hand slots though?
That's the thing.
For Wendy, it might be.
Go on.
Simply because she doesn't have much else other than the rogue splash cards. This is her only hand card. Yeah. And she's super weak in that fight anyway, like we saw in the Investigator. So in a pinch, I think it's totally okay for her to have this. But I probably wouldn't run baseball bat in, again, a Zoe deck or in a deck that has access to more efficient weapons that don't require both hands.
Yeah, I agree. I find that baseball bat is to me, it's I put it in my Wendy deck for when you're getting to near the end of the scenario and the clue finding all that stuff is done, and now we have to fight a big enemy or something, and it's coming down to combat. You don't care about your magnifier or your flashlight anymore, or whatever else you have. You're just picking up a baseball bat and you're swinging for the fences.
That's about right.
Yeah, I think I was more high on it when I first kind of got the game and was going through the cards, and it's definitely not bad. I like that all the weapons kind of have their own limitations. The biggest limitation here is those 2 hands. So yeah, it's something that I have run in Wendy, and a lot of times I'm using it because my Wendy build just focuses on dodging enemies, and the few enemies I have to kill, I just backstab or sneak attack them. But it's good to have it as an emergency option. So it's definitely very Survivor-y.
I've heard nothing about that skull or auto fail token effect. Clearly, you guys have not had this break on you and a very terrible moment. I have.
I haven't had it break yet. No.
Hopefully, our next level 2 baseball bat will be made of aluminum. I'm sure that happened in the 20s.
Or you can just turn it into like 2 and you dual wield it somehow. 2 shards.
There is.
I could see like a slightly upgraded baseball bat. Only if you get the tentacle revealed, you drop it.
Hmm.
Like maybe 1 XP, and maybe it costs 1 instead of 2.
They should
I'd say
make a
that.
free version of this that's the corked baseball bat, and that one breaks on any token.
But you get +3
But it
damage.
does an additional 8 damage.
All right, now I don't know if we have an established turn order here, but I'm gonna hop it because this is a card
Yep.
that I have done a complete 180 on. So Scavenging is a 1-cost level 0 asset, has a lore pip. It is a talent and reaction after you successfully investigate by 2 or more. Exhaust Scavenging to choose an item card in your discard pile and add it to your hand. So when the core came out and I started playing around, this seemed way conditional. And didn't seem like, at least for Wendy, it would hit. Definitely not for Agnes. It seemed like for Wendy, it would not hit often enough to be worth it. Now, having played it outside of the core and seeing how it can work in someone like Ashcan Pete, I now reverse that stance. And this is an awesome card, but you have to build with it in mind.
Oh, definitely.
I will mention, because this was a ruling that a lot of people weren't. If you are investigating and you use an item and you chuck it for its skill pips, you cannot scavenge that item that you just chucked for that investigate. So you'd have to get it the next time you use scavenging. But
Yep. So it just delays you by a turn. And that's unfortunate, but it makes sense because generally events kind of hang in, per card Tory. And it makes sense that skills would do the same.
But I
Yeah,
mean, that is one of the sneaky uses of scavenging, or maybe not so sneaky, which is you can obviously, maybe at first glance, you see it and think I can recycle my baseball bats or flashlights, which is valid. But it's also like you can chuck Wendy's Amulet for 2 wild or another item for its icons, and can't get it back for that test. But for subsequent tests, you can, have it back in hand. Or if you
a rabbit's foot.
if you discard an item for Wendy's ability to cause the redraw, all of those ways to get into discard is just as valid and a way to basically make all your cards worth more than just what's printed on them.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out when you build for this, you put in the flashlights, you put in the perceptions, you put in the rabbit's foots or the rabbit's feet. It's actually not as hard as you would think it is to succeed by 2 or more, at least on standard. And this weekend when we played on hard, my friend Kip was playing my Ashcan deck with this combo built in with the scavenging in mind, and it worked for him just fine. So I don't know. I was very low on this card out of the core, but I have recanted. I am now on team scavenging.
So now, Ian, you favor Wendy out of the core set. Do you run 2 scavengings? Do you build around scavenging even for Wendy?
I haven't so far in the my deck, which was pretty successful through the core and the Carnival. I haven't taken it against Ruguru actually, but I didn't build it around scavenging. It was just kind of a leaner build that honestly didn't really need it.
Sure.
But I think it's something you could do 1 copy of, perhaps 2 of, if you're going to really build around it. The thing I like about it is, unlike burglary, it's not replacing the investigation. It's just giving you a bonus on top of it. So that's something that I think is very valuable about it.
And it's only 1. You throw it down, and even if you only get like 2 or 3 uses out of it over the course of a game, it's kind of paid for itself, and it's just there.
Yeah, I like to run 1. Like if you're building around it and building like a scavenging deck, then obviously 2. But it's nice to just have 1.
Mm-hmm. I think doing 2 of in a Wendy deck might be a little bit of a stretch. I think you could do it, but I would agree that with Ashcan it makes so much more sense.
And let me point out why I was talking about the amulet earlier. So recycling her amulet with scavenging is real good. So if you've got her her amulet and Rabbit's Foot in hand, and whatever other skill cards you happen to be using, that's a lot of extra icons you can be adding to tests over the course of however many turns. And then if you're adding to tests that way, then probably you're not spending resources as much, which means you might be more well positioned to use Hard Knocks or Dig Deep, like we'll talk about in a minute. Those innate, those mercenary skills, not innate talents, those mercenary talents. So I don't know. I actually, ever since having my revelation with Ashcan Pete in Dunwich, I haven't gone back to try the scavenging Wendy build, but I have faith that it would work just as well. Because
I just have a big fear for pitching Wendy's amulet to a test, failing the test, using Rabbit's Foot, drawing Abandon and Alone. Bye, amulet.
Well, that's going to happen at some point, but
it is. That's
Arkham.
Exactly.
You can't avoid the shit.
And it turned out Abandon and Alone was the last card in your deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, guys, if we're going to build the worst case scenario.
And it's a Wendy deck. Never play Wendy, guys, because this could happen.
Equals and then Wendy Daisy comes along and fails the medical text 3 times and kills you. Just because.
Okay. So this guy got some fun play on our podcast just because I love the art on this one so much. So I jumped the order. I think we're on Ian?
Probably. Sounds about right. Stray Cat is a 1-cost asset with an agility icon, ally, and creature. And a free action is free triggered ability. Discard Stray Cat, automatically evade a non-elite enemy at your location. Just has 1 health and no sanity, because clearly it's insane.
Clearly. Or it's a cat of Ulthar.
It's immune to all horror, yeah. It's not afraid of anything.
Well, all cats are already batshit, so that's just how that works. Important thing to point out before we actually start discussing this is, since it specifies at your location, this does not have to be an enemy engaged with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an important point.
It's a really handy ally. I think my only issue with it is that it takes up the ally slot.
Yeah.
That's its biggest weakness.
Yeah. And once, something like, Charisma has been previewed. I know we're talking outside the core, but like I kind of see Charisma as you add it to your deck so that now you have 2 ally slots. You have your permanent ally, and then you have your do something ally, and then leave ally. You know what I mean? Like you have one spot for ally. Yeah, that's perfect for a Stray Cat. Right now, I might throw 1 in a Wendy deck, but I'm usually putting Leo in.
Right.
Yeah, my Wendy usually has eyes for a cat burglar.
Yeah.
So instead of this, I might have 1 as a kind of emergency button, but I find myself rarely using it. I like the idea of an automatic evade. I don't know. I feel like this is something that might end up being more splashy in some other investigator at some point.
It's a nice panic button.
Yeah, exactly.
But that ally slot, man, is definitely the most valuable.
It's valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And Wendy, we talked about Roland having a kind of a crowded one. I think Wendy's got a pretty crowded one too, because Stray Cat is good. It's just it takes up the ally slot, and then you have Leo, and then you have Cap. Like yeah.
I think anyone who can take Leo, like automatically, every other ally suddenly comes into scrutiny a little bit more, because it's like, okay, Milan's pretty good, but Leo extends my turn. Like Leo, I think he sets the bar, in my opinion. Him and Milan especially, but Leo, just for his universal usefulness, sets the bar for core set allies. And yeah, when you're running Wendy, what would you rather have? 2 Stray Cats or 2 Leos? Well, you're not going to run 2 of both. That'd just be silly.
Though to be fair, Leo costs 6 and Stray Cat costs 1. So
then that's.
But Stray Cat only does it once.
This is
Leo
true.
does it every turn.
This is true. All right,
But-
fair enough.
And you can't scavenge a cat, unfortunately.
And you cannot scavenge a cat, though they are known to hang around dumpsters, oddly enough. It seems a shame that you can't pull a random cat out of a dumpster, but
They should have put a cat on the art of scavenging just to taunt you with it, just to like sitting on the back of the wagon, just staring at the guy.
Mm-hmm. That's the
all
best
right,
way.
Nick, brace yourself for a lizard bird pig attack and read the next card, please.
Dig deep. We were just talking about least favorite art in the set. I think
Yeah, this
one's up
one
there for me.
bothers me.
Really?
I think it's supposed to be a ghoul. Like
It's
looking at the ghoul
unsettling.
art. It
Man,
well,
bear,
yeah,
pig.
it's
It looks like someone has a suit on, or it's like a pinata
Yeah.
that has gained consciousness. Or something.
well, and I don't know what it is about
Let's bust it
her
open and get the
expression.
presents.
I don't know what it is about the lady's expression in this, or like the positioning of the monster, but it's like there's no urgency to this conflict, in my opinion. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
she's reaching for something, but it looks like a very just kind of like, let me just grab
Whatever.
this, and then maybe I'll push you off, maybe not.
That's because
Anyway,
she's got high willpower, though.
yeah,
She's very
exactly.
calm, right?
Yeah.
She's upped it with
Uh,
6 resources.
You're telling me this woman's in no peril?
No, she's not.
I'm not saying she
panicking.
isn't. She's not panicking, is what it again. There's no urgency to
Well,
this.
that's because,
Anyway,
that's because
dig
she's
deep.
digging deep.
Yeah, the 2-cost asset. It has a will and agility icons. The talent trait and free triggered action. Spend 1 resource. You get +1 will for this skill test. Or free triggered action. Spend 1 resource. You get +1 agility for this skill test. Good.
So, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is the worst talent of the course
I
Because
would
of-
not disagree.
because of the classes, or sorry, for the gators it goes with, and the stats it boosts. It's not what I want.
Right.
It's not what they need.
Nope, totally agree.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
Like specifically in a Wendy deck, I put Hard Knocks is really the only talent I find myself using. I put 1
Sure.
copy of Hard Knocks in Wendy now.
Yep.
Yeah, I
mean-
find she doesn't really need help. Those are her 2 strengths, so
Yeah.
She doesn't
Yeah.
really need it for the willpower because, I mean, 4 is it's a perfectly acceptable place to be sitting if all you're looking to do with your willpower is fight the encounter deck's will tests. If you're not looking to
Mhm.
sling spells, 4 is an okay place to be. So she
Yep.
It's a good place to be.
doesn't really need help with that, and she's got evade out the wazoo just with her kit. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, I would agree.
And if
This
you
one,
if
this
you
one-
play Hard Knocks, there you go. You have the evade if you need it.
Yeah. Mhm.
but
And I
that's not
think-
to say it couldn't be good in some future Survivor Investigator.
That's true.
Right.
But what about Agnes, Sean? You're the Agnes fanboy. I feel like this is also not great in
Oh, yeah,
Agnes.
Agnes don't need this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not any higher on it than I was on any of the other mercenary talents, and I'm probably lower, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely like some of the other talents a lot more than this one.
Mhm.
I don't think I've used
keep
this
going-
one actually.
Right. I keep going back to physical training or hyper awareness again because I play Roland frequently. But like both of those, I have no problem putting 1 each of both of those, in a Roland deck. But anytime, whether it's Wendy, Agnes, or honestly, I can't think of a Dunwich, and I haven't gone through the Dunwich cards as thoroughly as I would like to yet. But I can't see finding a pressing need to include this card with any of the investigators we have right now.
Yeah.
All right, well, fair enough.
That's a ringing
right.
endorsement.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well,
So
button up,
Folks
2
here.
copies.
well, button up,
folks,
boys. We're moving on to the leather coat, which is a 0 cost, 0 level asset. It has a combat pip. It has the item and armor trait. It takes up the body slot, which is I think is the least used slot in the entire
Yeah.
core set.
It's 1 of 2.
And it has 2 health. So I like this card more now than I did when in my pre-scavenging days. So being able to chuck this for a test and then pull it back potentially, tossing it down for 0 and letting it soak a couple hit points. Not bad. I like it. I like it again. Looking forward to Dunwich. I like it in Duke better than I like it in Wendy. But
just to keep Duke alive.
Right, or
really.
just to have a shield from something that discards an asset.
Sure.
But it's all right. I think it's ended up being a one of in both Agnes and Wendy when I've been building in the core only meta.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from my memory, the core set bad guys, for the most part, hit a little bit harder on health than sanity. And so I feel like a free 2 health is fantastic. I run one in my Agnes deck, one in my Wendy deck. 2 might be a little much, but definitely 1. And it's the body slot. Like, you're never going to fill it.
Right. Right now, it's just like it's so not in demand. Like, give us more armor, please. Fewer allies, more armor.
I mean, you got the bulletproof vest, but
yeah,
why not just get it for 0 instead of 3 experience and 3 cost or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know anyone. I don't know that anyone who can take leather coat would take bulletproof vest.
Yeah,
it's not enough. It's not better enough to justify the experience. But we'll get there.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of sits around that one of space for me as well.
It's good to have it when you need the extra hit points, but most of the time you don't, so you're not sad if you don't see it. At least for me.
It's just as effective late game as it is early.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. So now this next one, I have no idea what I'm going to say about this one. So
I'm kind of there with you.
Okay, so Scott, do you want to read the Aquinnah?
Shaniqua?
Aquinnah?
Shaniqua, okay. She's the Forgotten Daughter. She's a 5 cost, 1 level asset. She has the Willpower pip, ally trait, and the reaction when an enemy attacks you, exhaust Shaniqua and deal 1 horror to her. Deal that enemy's damage to another enemy at your location instead. And then you still take the horror dealt by the attack. She's got 1 health, 4 sanity, and takes up the ally slot.
Hey, does this scream small target to anyone, Ian?
Yeah. And much like that card, this possibly wins the award for like coolest effect that I really want to build around, and I just haven't done it yet because it doesn't quite work with the decks that it can fit in.
Right.
Like, I love the mechanic of it. You know what the greatest tragedy is? Is that in Dunwich, Zoe cannot take this card because this is a Zoe card.
Yeah.
This is a perfectly Zoe card. But
so
as
I will
stands,
say that. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go this time.
Okay. I found, so when I first started playing Wendy and Agnes, although I played Agnes a lot, Aniqua, like, she was back of the box.
Aquinnah.
I did not. Aquinnah. Shaniqua. There we go. Back of the box, I never chose her. And I was like, you know what? I really have to try her out because I'm not giving her a fair shake by just not. And so I played through a couple campaigns solo with Wendy, and then I think 2 campaigns solo, 2 campaigns 2-player, where my first upgrades were 2 Aniquas.
Aquinnah.
Aquinnah. I'm sorry, it's stuck in my head now. And I was like, I just got to give it its fair shake. It is so niche. I like the 4 sanity it gives.
Yes.
But the ability is just blank to me. Like, it's the amount. I think I may have triggered it 2 or 3 times. I can't remember. Very little in 4 core campaigns. So
now in those games that you played with this ally, were those true solo? Were those 2-handed?
When I say solo, I played true solo. I hate 2-handed. And whenever I played 2-player, it was 2 actual players. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, but so you did test this solo, like you played with Aquinnah solo. Okay.
Yes.
To me, that's where she's gonna, like, that's, if I were to guess, that's where she would be strong. But the fact that you played her in solo games and still were not satisfied with her performance, then it's like, man, rather have Leo.
Well, she's in a tough spot because it definitely in solo, you're more likely to take an extra enemy when you don't expect it, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're also...
It's one card per deck. Or one card off the deck, right?
Yeah, it's one
Each
card off
turn.
the deck. If you get it at the right time, great. But this costs 5 to get down. And then you also have to have the enemy engaged with you. You also have to take the horror, which, I suppose is probably not terrible because you could, in a pinch, deal it to her. And even if she goes away, that's fine. But
Right.
I just think she's like 1 or 2 steps too balanced.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing is, I actually will counter your argument, Nick. I think she's better in multiplayer with a higher density of enemies because she specifically says deal that enemy's damage to another enemy at your location. So the enemy density, as long as the group is sticking close together, will still be higher, but you have more flexibility as to where you deal the damage. It doesn't have to be 2 enemies engaged with you. It only has to be 1 enemy engaged with you.
Right. Mm.
It's taking up that ally slot that
And there
hurts.
it is.
We talked about that already with Wendy, obviously, has that issue, and Ash Can, our other survivor, already has some, quite a bit of options since he can draw from allies from anywhere. So it's tough. I don't know. Maybe in the future with charisma, maybe you might come up with some cool combination there. It's just tough when thinking about like Wendy, for example. Wendy solo, which is often what I would be playing, to think of situations where I'm going to have 2 enemies engaged with you. Like maybe I can have one that's evaded and one that's still with me, but I don't know. Most of the time I'm just getting the hell out of there with cat burglar or evading or dancing around it. If I'm in this situation, it's not going well for me, I guess.
It's too bad that Wendy can't just ride on her back and we can just give Aquinnah the body slot instead of the ally slot. Then she might see some more play.
Agree.
So I will say
like Hodor.
the one cool trick I did find when I was is that if you have 2 enemies engaged with you, you evade one, and then you go to move, and then that triggers the attack of opportunity. You use Aquinnah to take the attack of the one that isn't exhausted and smash the other guy, and then you finally move to the location you're going to. That I found was a cool little trick, but that's about it.
I think the main... I feel like she's more an Agnes card than she is a Wendy card. And Agnes... she likes those initiates. I don't think Agnes has a whole lot of competition for her ally slot in the core scenario or in the core meta. Nowadays, her boyfriend Pete shows up and they just go to town. But in the core set metagame, I'm actually kind of sad I didn't play around more with Aquinnah in multiplayer Agnes core, because it's actually it could be a big move to Aquinnah, a 2 attack enemy at another enemy, then still take the horror and then use Agnes's ability to do an extra damage to that other enemy and just wipe something out off another investigator. And there's so many cool things to do here, but I think it's just there's one too many things that have to fall into place. I think she needs to cost like 3, and then she's totally worth it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I really want to like her more than I do. She's a really cool. She's a really cool effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
We talked about her longer than I thought we would.
Yeah.
So then I think that brings us to Ian for our first event, which might be my favorite art in the game.
Yeah, continuing on the art talk, Turkey Time, also known as Cunning Distraction, is a 5-cost event with a will and a wild icon. It's a tactic, and it basically triggers an evade action, and you automatically evade all enemies at your location, regardless of whether or not they're engaged with you.
It's the Survivor Dynamite.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's great in scenario 3 of the core.
Yes.
In the Devourer below, if you can get this in your hand early game and keep it, you are looking solid. That's
it's kind of like Dynamite in that it's not always it's gonna come in handy, but when it does, it's
Right.
gonna completely save you.
I have been running one copy of this in my Zoe deck, but I have not had the instance where I've needed to use it yet. But feels like
do like that it hits. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm hoping that was a smart move to include it. I guess we'll find out eventually.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know the big bomb turn it saves you for.
Yeah.
Or saves for you. Whatever that preposition.
I like that it
wherever
evades,
that needs to go.
It evades all the enemies, kind of like a straight. It's like a super straight.
It is. It's a super stray cat.
It is a super straight turkey.
But no, that turkey went exactly where it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is cool that you could pull a bunch of enemies off your other investigators too. Like if you've got a team and you guys are kind of under the gun, and everyone, 3 out of 4 of you have an enemy engaged with you, and it's just kind of like, oh, we're falling behind, we need to get out of here. Then this could be a big bomb save card. But at the same time,
right,
the situations where it's worth it, every penny of that 5 resources, I think, are fewer and farther between.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a glory story where you have a 4 and Roland is last. Wendy plays this, evades everything. People run away, and then Roland tosses the dynamite in the room on the way out. Like 10 resources to take out.
Achievement
however many enemies. Exactly, yeah, and it'll happen once.
Hammer down,
and then never
nerf
again.
This.
Yeah. So
that was for you.
I'm not a super fan of this. I think it costs too much.
I'm sitting at a 1 of in my Survivor decks currently.
Yeah.
If it comes up, I don't mind chucking it for its wild pip. And if the opportunity presents itself to play it, it's there. And when it works, it works well.
Well, and that's why, like, to me, this card seems, like I mentioned, I have it in my Zoe deck. This seems like a Zoe card because with that high cost, that's kind of mitigated with her base ability, which you generate resources when you engage enemies. So it seems like this is almost, quote unquote, a free play if you can set up the right turn. But again, you have to set up the right turns. So in a Survivor deck, in a Wendy deck, I would throw 1 in just as a panic button, but I don't know if I would. I probably would not go 2.
It's better in multiplayer, where your concentration of enemies is going to be higher.
Yes.
It's tough because we talked about it. I can't even remember what card. Maybe it was one of the Seeker cards about potential. Oh yeah, it was Barricade about potential sideboard cards. But there are no sideboards in this game because you don't get to build your decks all over again for each scenario. So it makes my judgment of these cards a little different. But
sure.
Those situations where it does save you are so standout that it's kind of similar to Dynamite, where I run 1 and just I'm not going to play it a lot of games or even most games, but maybe it'll save my campaign at some point. And it's kind of hard to quantify what is that worth compared to the times it sits in your hand.
Well, and similarly to Dynamite as well, that's also, like, I run 1 of, example again, Dynamite in my Roland deck, run 1 copy of that, and then it's usually one of the first cards that I end up replacing when I upgrade. So I could see Cunning Distraction doing that as well. Maybe keep it for a scenario or 2, and then if you haven't used it by that point, you might just be like, well, this isn't pulling the weight, and I want to get Aquinnah in my deck for whatever reason, so trade those out.
And I think this might be a metagame card too, because as mentioned, scenario 3 of the core set, I'd put 2 of in a Survivor deck that could take this, just because there is that defining moment that will happen where this is amazing and it's a thing.
Sure.
But as a generalist card, I don't know that I'd go more than 1.
Yeah, I was speaking more of like the blind run through scenarios.
Right.
Yeah, if you know what's coming, then that'll inform it.
Okay. It's always funny how much more we talk about the cards we're unsure of, and then the good cards are like, yeah, good. Okay, move on. Speaking of which.
Yeah, speaking of which.
God, I can't remember who read that last card. I think this one's Ian. It might be Nick.
I think I read the last one.
Yeah, I think it's Nick then.
Okay. Look what I found. 2 cost event, 2 intellect icons. It has the fortune trait. It's a fast card. Play after you fail a skill test by 2 or less while investigating. Discover 2 clues in your location. Okay.
2 copies.
2 copies.
Yeah, 2 copies. Moving on.
Anyone who can play this. Well, not anyone. No. In the core set, Agnes and Wendy, 2 of.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, one of Survivor's things is win by losing, and here you go. This is one of their best effects that does that.
And you get 2 clues, not just one. If
Like,
it was
right,
it's so funny how this turns your mindset when you have this in your hand. You're like, oh god, I hope I failed this skill test.
Yeah.
Oh no, I succeeded! Damn it!
Yeah. And one key thing too is with the whole, the negative tokens from the chaos bag, if there is a shroud of 2 and you test and you get minus -1 million, not including the tentacle token, but just a minus -1 million, your skill goes down to 0. You still only failed by 2 because you can't go negative. So your skill goes to 0, shroud of 2, you get 2 clues. So some locations, this is just man, I hope I draw the -4 token, and you get 2 clues for 2 resources. And
I think we've mentioned how good fast is as well. We like fast.
Yes.
Well, it is good, but you're
the
also
fast on this basically might as well it'd be a reaction symbol, right?
Yeah, like it's not saving you an action per se because you still need that action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting thing to note. I think, and I'm just noticing this now, so I very well could be wrong, but I think that this is the only card, at least that I remember seeing, where it says discover 2 clues in your location rather than at your location.
Those damn prepositions.
So you have to rip apart the location card and find the hidden
clues inside the cards.
Yeah. The clues are in the
The clues are coming from within the location. All right. So yeah,
I guess it goes with the artwork. So
it truly does. I love that art. Just like randomly. Oh, hey, look at that.
Look what I found.
So then moving on again to another card where, I just don't know that there's a whole lot to say about it. It's one of my favorites.
It's okay.
Yep. And I will forever, as I mentioned on the podcast, say this in Napoleon Dynamite's voice. Lucky is a 1-cost event, has the fortune trait. It is also fast. Play when you would fail a skill test. Get +2 to your skill value for that test. Oh, hi, Chaos Bag. You tried to screw me? I don't think so.
Do you ever not run... Yeah, I would say, do you ever not run this with literally any investigator that can use it?
I don't know, Nick. Do any investigators not pull tokens from the Chaos Bag?
Well, that's what I mean. Like I was... Again, I'm going to keep going back to Dunwich because those are the last cards that I messed with. But when I was building decks from the Dunwich investigators, I'm like, why would I not put Lucky in here? Like, I was Nick. Like... Oh my god, it's so good.
It's
an insurance policy, and who doesn't like being covered?
It's essentially an unexpected courage that you get to play after you draw.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which is the key part of it. I've seen it compared to it's kind of like a one of those neutral skill cards that give you 2 icons, but it's not because of course, I'm going to bring up Lord of the Rings again, but some of the most valuable cards in that game are ones that you can play after you've seen your encounter cards come out and said, okay, I need more willpower for the quest. It's the same thing here. Like, making a decision of when to play a card with full knowledge is always better than without that knowledge. So
it's a counter spell.
And you combine this with something like what I found and Wendy's ability. It's what I was talking about at the beginning. It's just like so many layers of fail safes to protect you that you eventually you aren't really failing tests.
And see, this is kind of why I'm iffy on like I'll probably only run 1 because I have Look What I Found. I have Lucky, and I mean I understand Look What I Found works with Rabbit's Foot, but with Wendy's ability, with Lucky, with another card we're about to go to in 2 cards. Yeah.
All right, so I suppose it bears just moving on to the leveled up Lucky. Or Lucky! Level 2 Lucky. All of that gravy we just talked about, except you also draw a card.
As if it couldn't get any better.
Yeah.
This tends to be one of my first upgrades for those investigators who can take it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Even for Agnes.
Especially for Agnes.
Yeah.
Because
Agnes fails a lot of skill tests.
Oh, you know what? But she tends not to have quite as much card draw as Wendy does. Wendy can cycle a bit.
Yeah.
The thing is, so often you're aiming for that +2 over a skill test, and so this is for all those times when it turns out to be a -3 or -4.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Sean,
just like you feel safer with this card in your hand.
Yeah, it's like a warm blanket.
Or an insurance policy. Are you covered?
Sure.
Sean,
I have my blanket insured.
As the Agnes Pro, would you rather... So you have 4 experience.
Don't do this to me.
2 upgrade Lucky or 1 grotesque statue?
Definitely 2 Lucky. They're kind of they're working toward the same thing, but 2 Lucky does more for your deck because you're presumably in your level 0 Agnes deck, your starter deck for Agnes, you've got 2 level 0 Luckies. Yeah. So you don't have to find room for it, which can be good.
I was assuming that, yeah.
And then it also makes your deck 2 cards smaller.
Yep.
Which, weaknesses notwithstanding, I still think is a good thing.
I agree.
Okay, I was worried that question was going to be harder than it was. Okay, so then moving through to the leveled cards. Scott, you want to talk us through a close call here?
Yeah. Close Call is a 2 level 2 event. It's got a combat pip and a agility pip. It's got the fortune trait, fast keyword. Play after a non-weakness, non-elite enemy at your location is available. Shuffle that enemy into the encounter.
This dude is totally wondering if he left the gas on.
Yeah.
That is not the look you make when you just closed a monster in a room.
Yeah, it really is. I think he's friends with the Dig Deep lady. They're both so nonchalant at danger.
Okay, silliness aside, this is kind of like Survivor's Disc of its Samna, right?
This is great for those hunter enemies, those stupid hunter enemies that are going to keep coming after you. Instead, you evade them and just shuffle them away.
It doesn't get rid of... Oh, God, it'd be so wonderful if it got rid of stupid stubborn detective, though. I love that.
He's too stubborn for that.
Yeah.
I don't know what else you can say about this card. It's fast. It's got 2 different icons that you could throw if you don't find an opportune time to play it. It's good. I think I've only ever upgraded to it once, because the next card we're going to talk about is kind of my late game Wendy pull. But this one's not bad. I wouldn't overlook it. Especially if you're running the full set of stray cats, because this isn't like if it's evaded via the standard evading test. Like, you could just hold a stray cat in reserve and be like, oh, hi, Night Gaunt, back in the deck with you.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, well. It's funner when you guys disagree.
Sean, I just agree so strongly with the introduction you've given the next card that I think you're correct in your assessment. So,
well, Scott, then do you have the will to? Oh, I'm sorry, this is Ian's card. Do you have the will to recite?
This is where we need the Eye of the Tiger. So 4 cost, 3 XP event with a combat and wild icon. It has the spirit trait, which is interesting. Fast, play only during your turn. Until the end of your turn, do not reveal chaos tokens for any skill test you perform. Just throw the chaos bag in the trash. You don't need it.
Done.
Mhm.
Yeah, you remember how
This
the most
card-
annoying part of the game is the unsurety of everything?
This card with Leo DeLuca won me Carnival.
I believe it.
So I'm going to be as spoiler free as I can. The 2 special locations were in the perfect wrong order. So I had to fully loop around, if you get me.
Yep.
And this one, like, I just ran through a bunch of enemies and just did things that shouldn't be done with a stray cat. And
What?
Okay.
Well,
Go on.
I'm just saying I was able to evade who I needed to evade and get to what I was doing. And yeah, it was fast, which was awesome. I had a stray cat, also kind of fast essentially. And yeah, being able to just do the math, it's kind of like in Lord of the Rings, no shadow cards. You just here's the math. I win or I lose. So
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, the Eye of the Tiger references have to be intentional, right?
It has to be. Yeah. There's no way.
I can't believe we missed asking Matt about that when we interviewed him.
Yeah.
Okay, then Nick, why don't you go ahead and bring us home with the last skill here?
Survival instinct. Survivor skill, 1 agility icon. It is innately traded with the innate trait. If this skill test is successful during an evasion attempt, the evading investigator may immediately disengage from each other enemy engaged with him or her and may move to a connecting location. Great.
Have you used it?
Okay. Have I? No.
Okay. This is one that like I think I've only once actually has it made it into a deck I've made.
Really?
I think I usually start with 1 maybe on a Wendy deck, depending on the build. But elusive is just better.
True.
Yeah, and I'm definitely a member of the Cat Burglar Anonymous Society. I'm addicted to that card, so that kind of negates the need for this for the most part. I think Wendy specifically just has so many options with the rogue stuff that this isn't needed.
Yeah.
Maybe perhaps other survivors in the future, this could be something to look to. But even in Survivor, there's other kind of evadey options. So I don't know. It's not a bad card. It's just
there's
kind
a lot
of
evading
fighting for a spot.
Yeah.
That's just it. Is it's evading for redundancy. But the nice thing about this is that it's basically a free move action, right?
Yeah.
That's what you should see when you see this card. Because ideally, you want to know that you can evade the enemy when you trigger that evade test. So really what you're getting out of this is a free move action. And that can be really awesome. But I don't know if it's worth committing this card specifically in your deck for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it could show its value in the same scenario we were talking about, Will to Survive? No. Which one was it?
Cunning Distraction.
Yeah.
Talking scenario 3 of the core set.
Yeah, where you just boop out. Like you choose the easiest to evade enemy and evade them all. But
yeah, and the fact that you're not paying 5 like you would for Cunning Distraction, it doesn't evade them, which is the difference. So if there's any hunters, then it's an issue, but otherwise,
I don't think it's a bad card. I think Ian, you hit it on the head. Is that it's just fighting for a spot that's already pretty well trodden in at least the survivors that we have already. So while not bad, certainly serves a purpose. I just think it gets overshadowed by the current card pool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, so survivors, those red ravens. Have we decided it's a raven in the art? It's got to be a raven, right?
It's a bird.
I think so.
Well, some kind of avian being.
An eagle.
So I don't know. I've pledged my banner fully to the Mystics, and I stand by that. But if I had to, a second banner would be pledged to the survivors. I love the mechanics. I love the do more with less. I love the win by losing. It's great when you're behind. It's okay when you're ahead. And kind of all the fun fixing stuff that they do. And God, lucky. God, just being able to include 2 lucky in your deck. Yeah. Everyone should be able to live with that kind of safety net at some point in their lives.
I think what turned me over to the survivor side as opposed to the mystic side was that I'm a very mathy person, and I liked mathing out turns and having contingency plans upon contingency plans on how to pass. That's what Survivor does, or so it seems. And it's just pass those skill tests, or even if you don't, you still get a benefit.
Right.
It rewards tactical play for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Sean. That Rogue is my favorite class, but Survivor is definitely my second. I think for a lot of people, Survivor is going to be like their second favorite, which might sound like an insult, but it's actually a compliment.
Yes.
And I think I like it because, similar to what you said, Scott, I just, as a game player, I like having backup plans and emergency buttons. That makes me feel safe. I don't like being scared about what's going to happen. And also Survivor feels like kind of roguey to me. They have some rogue elements to them. And that's why Wendy is my favorite core set investigator, because that combination of Survivor and rogue, she just feels like really hits the nail on the head of what it feels like to play like a rogue character in an RPG.
Sure. Yeah, her rogue splash is like, that's when you feel the real Wendy character coming out.
She good.
Yeah. Sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think that I'm the only person who felt this way, but I remember cracking open the core set at Arkham Knights and looking through all the cards that were available. And I knew, obviously, I was building a Roland deck right away, but Wendy just didn't interest me in Survivor. Like, it seemed like they had some good tools right off the bat, but I didn't actually give it the thought and the consideration that I would later do. And now I would totally agree that of the core set investigators, for sure, Wendy is my second favorite, behind True Blue Roland. But like, it's, and again, Survivor cards, and going back to the Dunwich investigators again, because those are the stuff that I've looked at most recently, Survivor cards are usually the first thing I splash into any of the Dunwich investigator decks, simply because, again, stuff like Lucky, stuff like Look What I Found, the leather coat in some instances. All depends on the build and the investigator, but really Survivor is going to be the class that'll get you back from falling behind, and that is it's immensely useful. Like, that is, I'd rather do that than win more, basically.
I think that the key thing to Survivor being amazing as it is simply, honestly, the card Lucky. Like, it exists. What's your biggest opponent in this game? It's the Chaos Bag, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have a Gator that can take both Lucky and Ward of Protection,
who can do that?
Well, all the Dunwich guys.
Yes, exactly.
and
who can do that without spending their splash?
But you know what I mean? Like, Lucky is such a powerful mitigation tool, and Look What I Found as well. Like, the ability to splash those cards is just insane, and it's I think it's a very strong class. It's a very, very strong splash set.
Yeah. I think the last thing I would say is I know I've seen quite a few players kind of on one side of the spectrum, it sounds like, where we're definitely in the Wendy corner, but a lot of people have expressed trouble getting Wendy to work, which I think makes sense. You know, that one combat does at first glance seem like a really big hindrance when this game can be very enemy and combat heavy, but I think it's a tribute to how this game is built so far that I've been able to take Wendy through that core campaign and some of the standalones, and she did just fine and got, you know, the best resolutions possible. You can succeed at evading and kind of picking off the enemies you really need to kill. I don't know how it'll be in the future scenarios, but at least for now, that's the case.
I think Dunwich gave her a big boost with Fire Axe.
Yeah.
That shored up the big weakness. But what you're saying, Ian, I mean,
which gives everyone a big boost with Fire Axe.
Yeah. The fact that she has the Rogue Splash, I think, is what puts her ahead. If she had any other splash, I'd be iffy. Maybe Mystic, but then that's basically Agnes.
Right.
It's weak Agnes. Well, and speaking of, I've been kind of quiet about it this whole time, but I think one of the main reasons Agnes is so good is because she can lean on these survivor cards to shore up the weaknesses of her lower stats, because she's got all that power poured into her willpower, mediocre stats across the board in her other ones, and the fact that she can lean into these abilities that either, you know, shore up a failure with lucky, or, you know, win by losing with look what I found and randomly find clues.
Yep.
Agnes is just that much better because of it.
Yep. I think that's what puts Agnes very high up on the strength of Gators, even with Dunwich out.
Yep. All right, well, that sounds like a decent wrap. Survivor good. Red card's good. We like it. All right, well, thanks for joining us, guys, again. I'm not going to rattle off the whole thing because I'm sure if you're watching this, you've seen at least 2 or 3 of the other ones. So come out and listen to our podcast. Search Mythos Busters on Google. You'll find us. We have a Facebook, Twitter, Discord, YouTube channel. Go check those out, all under Mythos Busters. We will join you again. I hope you'll join us as well. Otherwise, it'll be kind of awkward and creepy. For the neutral card reviews. So stay tuned for next time. Bye-bye.